Right, so a little bit about Dr. Henderson whilst we wait. He is a doctor of philosophy and a member of the Rosicrucian order, which is quite interesting for me because the Rosicrucian order is very similar to the style of spirituality that I practice as well. He is a published author and a specialist in human thinking and behavior. So let's see if we can get him to join. I know he was on a few seconds ago, so it just might be a technical glitch on his side. Let's see if we can get that to come through. In the meantime, well, since our only guest right now is Margot, do you have any questions about today's session? Is there anything that you would specifically like to ask? Ah, there we go. Okay, so Dr. Henderson has joined. Oh, he's joined as the guest. Hi there, Dr. Henderson. I'm going to try and add you again. You should have a request popping up on your screen. If you could just click that, and then it should allow you to join the chat, or the live, I should say. Ah, there we go.
Oh, there we go.
Good evening. How are you?
I'm fine, thanks. And you?
Yeah, not too bad at all, thank you. Thank you so much for taking time out of your evening to do this with us. We really do appreciate it. And I was just sharing a little bit about you in the interim whilst we were waiting for you to get on the call. Because something that kind of stood out for me as I was just going through your profile again and doing a little bit of background research is you are a member of the Rosicrucian order, which I think is
the Rosicrucian
really
order
interesting.
Is an order going back to the ancient Egyptian times. It's basically spiritual study, and it involves from the ancient Egyptian mysteries through the Greek mysteries, through the Templars, to present day sort of mysteries and ancient wisdom.
Right. So I've looked into it very briefly, and I won't bore our listeners too much with my journey because they're here to hear about you. But I've been studying and continue to study Hermetic Kabbalah, and as a result, I actually got very interested in joining the Rosicrucian order at one point in time, and it's still on my bucket list as something that I want to do a little bit more in-depth study into, just to learn a bit more about my Christian roots as well and my heritage, and see how that all fits into my overall spiritual understanding of things. But as I say, we're here to talk about you. So for the people who are listening to this today, and for those who are catching the replay later on, why don't you tell us a bit about yourself, about your background? Who is Dr. Jimmy Henderson?
Okay, fine. First, let me introduce you to, I've got a support dog. You know, blind people have got a support dog. So I've got a support dog here. He's called number one. He sort of gives me support during my talks and my articles, and sort of keeps me focused. And it's a present from my publisher. Thanks, myebook.co.za. Okay, if you want to talk about me, we're going to have to go back about 50 years, Stephen.
That sounds like as good a place to start as any.
I'm not a youngster. I'm as I say, when I started work about 50 years ago, and believe it or not, I was in the police force, and but I was in the technical services, and I was always in those days already. Back in the 60s, I was interested in science, and I then went into the technical services of the police, and then I finished off there. And it was during one of my first border visits. I actually had to go to the border, obviously, during those times. And I started reading the books of Lobsang Rampa, which I think most of you are familiar with.
Yes.
And that sort of got me an interest in metaphysics and spiritual stuff. And on my another border trip later on in the 70s, I actually came across the Rosicrucian order, some members of the Rosicrucian order. And we met up there. And when I came back to Durban, I joined the local chapter. And yeah, since then I've been studying with them since the early 80s. And I think that has been definitely the main focus and main line of my life has been this sort of spiritual study. You don't want to know about my background or anything like that. Is that sufficient for you?
That's fine. Yeah.
Yeah, the aspect of psychology. I've got to talk about that. Yeah. So what happened was, when I was in the technical services, I started studying psychology, which is linked to science in a way. You'll find in my books, I'm a published author of quite a few books on the mind and the power of the mind. And I try to link up psychology and philosophy, which I've studied as well, with metaphysics and try and explain it in terms of concepts that people will understand. And so back in the early 80s already, I started studying psychology. And then I was then starting to integrate my theory of life with science and psychology. And then when I retired about 20 years ago, I went off a bit early. And I started going full-time into my writing. And I then started publishing books. Yeah, that is my approach in my books, as I say, is to integrate science and psychology and with metaphysics and spirituality. And be able to explain spirituality in common sense concepts for the person that sits on the fence. And I've been doing that for the past 35 years now. And I'm at the point now where I do regard myself as a spiritual teacher. And then through my books and my articles and my talks, I've spoken quite a few times on radio. And I've then tried to get people to buy into this idea of, spirituality or mysticism or metaphysics is not some dark thing in the corner. It's actually based on science and natural principles. And that is the focus of my.
For sure, and that is definitely something that I've seen come out in the Rosicrucian order teachings, is that this is more about using natural divine law that, we're exposed to in a Christian country from a very early age, actually, but we never really understand how it works and how it operates in our lives. And this is learning how to use that, this is my understanding at least, learning how to use those divine principles to lead a more aligned life. Would that be a fair assessment?
Yes, that would be correct. Metaphysics itself is the study of these underlying natural principles and laws, which we can, and Rosicrucians then teach you to apply that in your life. And in my books, I actually have permission from the Grand Master to actually share some of this information, because obviously a lot of it is quite, I would say, I wouldn't say hidden, but it's not available to the everyday folk. But having spoken to the Grand Master, and he has seen my books, and he said to me, well, I can share stuff that is already out there. As long as it's not, as long as it's already out there, I can expand on that. As long as I don't sort of go into sacred symbols and things like that.
Yes, which is that is fair. Specifically because of how it would affect the psyche of people who are not aware of the impact that it can have. So yes, I understand that. If I may ask, I hope I'm not being too forward, but was there any sort of major shift in your life, or any form of, I suppose, a defining event that made you go, this is what I need to do with my life? Leaving the police force, leaving HR, leaving all of that for something more in the spiritual.
Yes, Stephen, that's actually very powerful. I'm glad you brought it up, because that was my defining moment. About 20 years ago, as I said, I was in the police force, and I was having a lot of problems adjusting to the new systems. And I actually was sidelined in a certain way, and my career effectively came to an end. And I was very upset by that, to the point where I actually went into a sort of breakdown. And as a result of that, I went into the dark night of the soul. where I felt completely empty, and I felt completely there was no meaning to life, and there was nothing left for me, and I completely emptied myself, to the point where I say that the ego, fortunately, looking back on it, I say that was the point where my ego surrendered, or where I surrendered my ego, and then I just took on a path of light after that. There was nothing left. I was right there at the bottom, and it was only light on the way up.
That is, it's both amazing and also, I suppose, par for the course. Any of us who've gone through any of these major shifts all have to go through that dark night of the soul, and there's so many themes that kind of just run concurrently from person to person. There's always something major that happens that, when you look back, could have been that defeating moment, but instead became a defining moment, which I think is so incredible.
You have to look in hindsight. I was a counselor for 34 years as well. I did a lot of work for Lifeline, training and development. And I was a counselor for 34 years. And the problem with that is, yes, some people can get through it, provided that you know what's going on and you are aware, you are mindful of the situation, yes, and mindful of the possibilities. If you're not, that experience can destroy you psychologically. I spoke to many people who have never recovered from a situation like that.
So then this leads me to a question which is, I suppose, a little bit off topic, but I promise we will get back to the main theme very quickly. Do you believe that a lot of the mental illness that we see, especially now currently with, and I brand mental illness even as just people who are suffering from anxiety, which is rampant. Do you believe that that is purely because people are ill-equipped to deal with the dark night of the soul, or even just general pressures that the world places upon us?
Yes, well, if one goes into the natural principles, we're talking about changing events, shifting energies, stages in unfoldment. The common belief amongst metaphysicians is that we are entering a new phase of energy,
yes,
a new level of energy, and that is heightened. I personally feel it. It's almost like the sunspots have become stronger, and you know what I'm saying. The energy levels just seem to have gone up for those of us that are sensitive, yes, to energy. Myself, it's almost unbearable from time to time. I can imagine that a person who doesn't have the insight or the hindsight into what's happening will actually, that's what I said to you earlier on, could actually, collapse into themselves and be going to mental disorder. Rather than use their energies to grow and say, okay, let's do the meditation during that auspicious time. Let's do the meditation, even though the energies are higher. Let's use them for unfoldment. But as I say, most people are not really clued up to this situation, and in my experience is that a lot of them implode.
Definitely, and I'm seeing that. I mean, I'm also sort of the last couple of weeks noticing this heightened, call it severity, of just the surrounding energy. It's emotional, it's it's everything combined at the same time. And I often think to myself, and I wonder, for people who don't have the techniques that we have available to us with our meditative practices that we are able to utilize, how are they coping? And I see it with a lot of my clients where they're not coping. It's a really difficult situation, and they're kind of just going, gosh, I just need to make it a little bit longer, and it will be okay. And sure, it will, but I'd like to see people come out of it better, as opposed to, sliding back into what was before. So,
I'll come to that conclusion, and we try to help people as far as possible. As I was a counselor, I've had to stop now due to this energy situation. And we try to help people through my books, through my articles, through my talks. I also try to help people to understand this. But there are many people sitting on the fence when it comes to metaphysics. and they still see it as dark and mysterious. And that is my purpose here, is to try and change that thinking into one of understanding.
Yes. I see we have a message from AJ Surya. If you'd like, you can feel free to leave a comment in the chat box. If you have a question for Dr. Henderson, please feel free to ask it, and I'll make sure to pass it on. I'm not sure, Dr. Henderson, are you able to see the chat coming up on the screen or not?
I can see something that says hello. I assume that
okay, yes, that is correct. Okay, so if a question comes up, we'll be happy to answer that. That's no problem whatsoever. But further on to your comments about, you're using these other, I suppose, tools now as opposed to one-on-one coaching and consulting sessions. In terms of the talks that you've been doing, first of all, thank you so much for the work that you've done with us at the Wellness Lifestyle Conference and continue to do with us. Would you like to talk about some of the topics, just a brief overview as to what you've discussed in the past, and also a little bit about your books as well?
Right. When it comes to understanding, I've got a certain approach which I use in my books. It's called multidimensional thinking, which is the title of one of my books. And I believe that with the thinking, we've created a lot of these problems in the world today with a certain way of thinking. And we're not going to solve the problems with the same way of thinking. I think Einstein said that.
No.
And I've introduced a new way of thinking called multidimensional thinking, where I take information from psychology, from science, from symbolism, from linguistics, metaphysics, and I'm able to then find answers to very, very difficult, complex questions, because the questions are not on one level. The questions have multidimensional levels of meaning. It's like saying, the perspective, there's no one perspective. Each person has a perspective based on his past experiences and on his religion and his frame of reference and his paradigm of thinking. Each person has a different perspective. And so I try to combine that and say, listen, guys, these are the natural principles you're involved here with, and we need to look at it multidimensionally. And I think I'm one of the few people who was able to solve the riddle of chicken and egg using multidimensional thinking. In one of my books, it's called Multidimensional Thinking. That's one of my books. The second one is called Multidimensional Perception, which is a bit more advanced. And I've just released one now called Understanding. Let me just get it for you.
Please, yes.
It's called Understanding Metaphysics. Using psychology to better understand metaphysical experiences. And this book has just been released. It's available on Amazon and all the sales portals, as well as from Fiona, who you spoke to the other day. Fiona van Rensburg has got stocks of my book there. She's a very good friend of mine. And I'm trying to introduce this new way of thinking where people are not go out of the box. Stephen, there is no box. People create boxes. You're thinking dimensional. It should be on various levels. The truth is, it's got so many levels. And in any case, so I try to introduce this concept of multidimensional thinking with my first book. My second book, I expand on. These books are basically based on my own personal experiences. It takes me 3 years to write a book, Stephen. The reason for that is that I actually do these exercises myself. I meditate regularly. And I do advanced visual imagery, and through my connection, not say connections, but I do have guidance as well. So I work on, and I'm trying to introduce people to this new way of thinking through my books. And the latest one, as I say, is just out now. It's quite advanced, but I've also written a number of other little short guides on counseling, trauma counseling. Skills, parenting skills, relationship skills. Also wrote about my dark night of the soul in a book of mine called Living on the Edge of Darkness. And I sort of gave some tips and skills how to get out of that pit. So I've written quite about, I would say about 10 10 books, I think, are hard copies, and there's quite a few e-book guides as well. So I think that's the extent of my books, and they're all focused on developing the mind, because my qualification is in what we call cognitive science, which is not mental disorders as such or clinical, but rather the way the mind works and the way the mind thinks and the way the subconscious activates the conscious mind. And I take people into subconscious programming in my books, and how to work with the subconscious mind, how to get through the subconscious mind, how to face your stuff in the subconscious mind, face your archetypes, face your memories, and then emerge on the other side with a completely empowered person.
And that is, I mean, that's incredibly powerful. That's what I would call essentially shadow work. Learning to integrate the shadow self, so that you are able to come out.
You can actually transmute it. You can transmute it, Stephen, if you're able to face it, and you can actually. I must tell you something now. I'm sure you've experienced it. You can actually communicate with your inner self, with those parts of yourself, those parts, the inner child. You can communicate with it. It becomes a separate personality, and you can say to your shadow self. In one of my books, I think it's this last one, Understanding Metaphysics. I actually face my shadow self, and I say, thank you for everything that you've done. Thank you for this. Thank you for that. Praise and all that sort of thing. And I say, please, I want you now to transmute. I want to use your energy now for growth. I don't want to use it now for darkness or chaos. I want to use it for light. And this shadow self actually assumes a personality which you can communicate with.
Oh, absolutely, yes.
That you can have when you do this inner work.
And that is so powerful. Please continue.
Yeah, no, I was going to say that is one of the most powerful experiences, is to face your inner self, the shadow, move through the cave of the subconscious mind, and come out on the other side, empowered and taking that energy and actually transmuting it into light.
Yes, and that is so incredible, because when I see, not just for my clients, but for myself as well, having looked at it and started to do that work, I won't say that it's I don't think it'll ever finish, but confronting those parts of yourself that you don't necessarily like. But then when you look at the situation, you realize why your shadow had to do certain things. And only when you're able to understand that, then you're able to turn around and go, right, now that I understand why that had to happen, I'm now able to integrate and use it, like you say, for good and for light and for a higher purpose.
One can
and
communicate
then you really
with oneself.
become. Yes.
One can communicate those parts of one that are fragmented. Even the fragmented parts of yourself, what we would call negative archetypes, the anger, the angry man, the greedy, the obese, greedy, fat person. They take on these forms. When you do deep, advanced meditation, these archetypes can actually take on forms which you can see with your spiritual eye.
Yes.
And when you confront them, you resolve them, you talk to them, you communicate, and you say, I'm sorry, and you recommit yourself. And they just release their energy. It's unbelievable.
It really is. And you're actually prompting me now, because I've known there was something I needed to do in my meditations that I haven't done in a while. And you've just prompted me now to add something to my regimen for the next week or so, especially going into, or rather coming out of Mercury retrograde. I think it will be such a good exercise to actually recheck and see which parts have fragmented again, because just like we defrag our hard drives every so now and then on our computers, your operating system, your consciousness is exactly the same, as above, so below. So it is really important to do that defragmentation of the psyche, so that you can be a more empowered person, for sure. Now, Dr. Henderson, I want to just move on very quickly. There's something I just want to double check here, that I don't get this wrong. There it is. Okay, great. So you, as I mentioned, you have been a speaker on the Wellness Lifestyle Conference, and for those
Yes.
who are watching or listening to this, that link is in my bio, so you can click through to that. For those people who purchase a ticket moving forward, they will be entered into a draw, and they stand a chance to win a signed copy, I believe, of your book, In Search of the Oracle. Dr. Henderson, would you like to do a quick run through as to what a reader can expect if they are the lucky person to receive that prize?
But this is quite interesting. This is the first book I actually ever published, self-published back about 20 years ago. And what it was, it's when I first started meditation, and I don't say first started, I started probably about 35 years ago. But 20 years ago, when I sort of had that dark night of the soul situation, I moved on to a new level of interacting with spirit. And a lot of stuff came to me, channeled information was given to me about the way we develop and the way we answers to important questions in life. So anybody who gets this book, this is a basic book on. It's actually not metaphysics. It's more like, I call it spiritual philosophy. It's information I gained during channeled information, which I then put in a storybook form, in a narrative form, of like very similar to the Pilgrim's Progress. In other words, a person climbing and slowly climbing a mountain, and all the obstacles that it's very metaphorical. It's totally metaphorical, and you climb, overcome boulders, and climb this and get through this bush, and everything has a meaning. Everything has meaning, and as I proceed through the narrative, I actually explain the meaning, what it actually means. Like if you encounter a boulder on your path during meditation, that means there's an obstacle you have to face, this sort of thing. And eventually you get to the oracle, which is actually an old man on top of the hill, almost like a guru, but he's actually the inner self. He is the inner embodiment of the inner self. The soul, or you want to call it the higher self. In psychology, they call it authentic self. And I then pose questions to this old man. What is the meaning of life? Well, what is God? All this kind of, all these important questions. And all the channeled information came to me, I actually put them in the book in a very metaphorical form. Yeah, it's a good read. I've had some very good feedback from the Renaissance magazine, and in fact the Odyssey magazine, when it was first out, going back 20 years, actually did a review. I think a guy's name was Chris something, and he did a review for me in the Odyssey magazine, and he gave me a very favorable review on this book 20 years ago, 2002, yeah. So yeah, that's a kind of book. It's a book on questions and answers about life, and it hopefully will answer some questions for people that have started on a path and are asking these questions and want a bit of help.
No, fantastic. Well, Dr. Henderson, thank you so much for being with us here today. Just to wrap up, to let everybody know again, Dr. Henderson has been a speaker on the Wellness Lifestyle Conference. You can find the link to that to purchase tickets in my bio, and you'll be able to gain access to his premium content, as well as being entered into a draw to win a signed copy of his book, In Search of the Oracle. And we hope to see everybody there. To the listeners who are catching this replay on YouTube, LinkedIn, Facebook, etc., please feel free to click the link below this video, which will be posted in the comments, and it'll take you through to the exact same links. Dr. Henderson, thank you again for your time. Really appreciate it. Any passing thoughts that you'd like to leave us with?
Yes, I want to invite people to have a look at my articles or my books. I've got a website. It's called www.discoveringyourself.co.za. www.discoveringyourself.co.za, and I've got lots of articles there. I've got links to my books. I've got links to my blogs. If you get onto that website, I'm sure that you'll get a lot of information that you need. Thanks, Tim.
Fantastic. And I'll be sure to tag you in this video as well,
Please,
when I
please.
post it to my Instagram and the various channels, so people will be able to click through to your profile. And I'll also make sure to drop the link in as well to your website.
Thank you so much. All the best. Eh?
Thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it. Have a great one.
Thank you, Stephen.
Bye.
Thank you to the Wellness Lifestyle Conference. Thank you.
Thank you. Cheers then. Bye.